Good morning, everyone. We'll just wait a few more minutes as people are still coming on. Okay, it looks like we have a good number of people here so far. I wanted to welcome everyone. I say good morning and good afternoon. For those who haven't met me yet, I'm Kim Henry. I'm the new Executive Director at CARS. I also want to take a moment to recognize Brenda on her retirement and thank her for her leadership and her great work throughout the years. I'm really looking forward to connecting with many of you, especially at our conference in June. Before we get started, I have a few quick updates. Our conference is coming up this June 14th in Halifax, and we'd love to see you there. Registration is open, and we are still currently looking for sponsors and exhibitors. So you can register at our website, and you can also look at the sponsorship and exhibitor information, or you could message us directly at info@cars.ca. And the early bird deadline has been extended, but we encourage you to register as soon as possible. I also want to flag that applications for our CARS Awards are currently open, and encourage you to apply or nominate a colleague who is doing great work in road safety. A few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. You'll see a post-webinar survey pop up at the end of the session, and we'll also share the link in the chat. So we'd really appreciate you taking a moment to complete that. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll ask them at the end. Now I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Essam Dabour, who's joining us for today's session on improving cyclist safety through the safe system approach, lessons from collision analyst. Dr. Dabour brings a tremendous depth of experience in this topic. He's the president of EDA Forensics, a professional engineer across multiple provinces, a certified road safety professional, and a fellow of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. He's also authored more than 60 research papers, and we're learning from someone who's both strong technical expertise and real world insight. And this is such a timely topic as cycling continues to grow across Canada. Understanding how and why collision happens and what we can do differently is more important than ever. Dr. Dabour will share practical lessons from collision analysis and connecting those insights to the road safety approach, the safe system approach, helping us think more broadly about design, behavior, and shared responsibility on our roads. We're very fortunate to have him with us today. And one quick note, the slide deck and webinar recording will be shared on the CARS website following today's session. Dr. Dabour, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kim, and thanks for introducing me. And it's always my pleasure to be with the CARS. Of course, I'm a member of CARS, and I have already enjoyed attending 2 conferences before. And I have also enjoyed attending several webinars as an attendee, but this is my first webinar here to deliver to fellow CARS members. So I hope you will enjoy it. So let's get started. As you said, Kim, I'm the president of EDA Forensics. This is an engineering company specialized in investigating collisions. I'm also a registered professional engineer, consulting engineer, fellow of ITE, certified or safety professional, blah, blah, blah. So let's move to the presentation. Let's get started now. First, as you said, Kim, more Canadians are now using uh, cycling. So, what is the reason for this? Of course, there are several reasons why we now see more bicycles than what we used to see 20 years ago, for example. First of all, it is the health benefits of cycling. We are now more health cautious. We are now more educated about health, and we all understand that cycling is a very good exercise for the body and the heart. And many people use cycling as a means of exercise. Another reason, of course, is the congestion. Many of our Canadian cities are now getting more congested. So sometimes it is easier and more efficient to go from point A to point B using a bicycle. This may take less time than using a motor vehicle. The third reason, in my own opinion, is the cost. Of course, owning and operating and maintaining a bicycle is much cheaper compared to a motor vehicle. Um, you almost don't need any maintenance, very low cost of maintenance, no fuel. Of course, now we have surging fuel costs for motor vehicles. So even if you take public transportation, the fare is now getting more expensive. Like the cheapest trip you can take with public transportation could cost you maybe $7 or $8. Some people cannot afford this, especially with the cost of living crisis that we're living now. So many people now turn to cycling as a cheaper mode of transportation. The fourth one is the supply of facilities. Now we see more cycling facilities than before, and the availability of cycling facilities attract more cyclists. So more people feel safer that there are dedicated cycling facilities, so they start using those facilities. And another reason is the technology. Now we have e-bikes, we have e-scooters, we have all those new types of electronic micro mobility. So it is, and I understand that this goes against the first benefit, which is the health. But some people prefer to use e-bike or e-scooter to go from point A to point B, which is still much cheaper than using a motor vehicle or public transportation. Uh, Please allow me to share this infographic from the city of Toronto. And I thought that this infographic could be helpful to understand different types of bicycles and micro mobility. Um, and in this infographic, this is the type of the bicycle, and these check marks will indicate whether it is allowed on traffic lanes, on bicycle facilities or bicycle lanes, uh, on physically separated bikeways like that have buffer, on trails, multi-use trails, or on sidewalks. So, for example, bicycles are allowed on roads, painted bikeways, physically separated bikeways, on trails, only if the e-bike is weighing less than 40 kilogram, and we'll talk about this in more detail later. And on sidewalks, it's only allowed for people under the age of 30. Of course, we have like electronic motor scooter, we have e-scooters. This is more common. And I'm a little surprised here because I was not aware, honestly, that the city of Toronto prohibit e-scooter on all types of facilities. Even though I see those e-scooters in many other municipalities. Um, on the other hand, the kick scooter, the manual one, which is not the electronic one, it is only allowed on sidewalks and multi-use trails, but it is not allowed on roads or uh, cycling facilities. And this is, don't forget, this is in the city of Toronto. Each municipality has its own regulation. And by the way, this is one thing that I understand it will be discussed during the upcoming CASP conference about micromobility and how municipalities can uh, reach like a standard way of allowing different types of micromobility so that users will not get confused. Uh, of course, a motorcycle is only allowed on roads. It's not allowed on sidewalks or cycling facilities. We have some other types of facilities of micromobility means. Now, in terms of cyclist facilities in Canada, in the next few slides, I will compare fatalities and serious injuries in Canada as a whole, and then I will go down to Ontario as an example of one province in Canada, and then I will go down to the city of Toronto as an example of one municipality in one province in Canada. So as you can see here, in Canada, roughly 49 to 50 people die every year in bicycle collisions, and it looks more or less steady. Like sometimes it goes a little down, sometimes it goes a little up, but it all goes around the number between 47 or 46 to 49. Of course, we hope that this will be eliminated. In terms of serious injuries in Canada, unfortunately, the trend seems to be increasing. So from 2019, it was less than 360 serious injuries. It keeps going a little up, up, up. Until 2023, it is more than 440 serious injuries. So I understand that the numbers are still small, but as all safety professionals, we hope that we can eliminate or at least reduce these numbers. On the other hand, in Ontario, fatalities seem to be also steady around 20 fatalities per year. Sometimes it goes a little up or a little down, but it is somewhere between, I would say, 15 to 25 or something. And this is per year. In terms of serious injuries, it looks more steady than in Canada. So it seems that Ontario is doing a good job in terms of cyclist safety as compared to other provinces in Canada because the serious injuries, they seem to be going maybe a little bit down or at least steady, not going up as compared to the overall number in Canada. Uh, in the city of Toronto, and these graphs are downloaded from the City of Toronto website. As you can see here, the numbers are very small, between 1 and 4 fatalities every year. So I don't think the sample size is large enough to understand any trend, but these seem to be very small numbers, and this is very good news, of course, for people living in Toronto. In terms of injuries, the numbers seem to be going down, which is also very good news, especially by knowing that the cycling facilities in Toronto are increasing, and many people are now using cycling as compared to 2016, for example. Okay, so in 2016, fewer people were cycling and there were like 37 serious injuries. In 2025, more people were cycling and there were only 27 serious injuries. Of course, again, we hope that the number would be zero. So to understand bicycle collisions, uh, first we need to understand what we mean by momentum. And of course, as all safety professionals, we understand that when two um, masses collide together, the impact depends on the momentum, which is the mass multiplied by the velocity. So the first mass has a mass of m1, which was moving at velocity v1. Second mass m2 moving at velocity v2. So the higher the mass or the higher the velocity or the speed, the more impact it will cause. And of course, more impact means more injuries. So by understanding this principle, first we have a bicycle colliding with another vehicle, bicycle colliding with a passenger car or a heavy truck or a bus. Of course, in this case, the bicycle has a lower mass and it is usually moving at lower velocity, then most likely the cyclist will be hurt much more than the occupant of the motor vehicle. And this is why we call cyclists vulnerable road users. On the other hand, if a bicycle collides with a pedestrian, it is a little bit different story. So I'm showing these two images here. This is in case a bicycle is using the pedestrian crosswalk, which is, by the way, not allowed by the law. And in this case, the cyclist may collide with a pedestrian on the crosswalk. Or here in the other image, a cyclist is using the sidewalk and, of course, may collide with a pedestrian on the sidewalk, which, of course, not allowed, as I said before. So in this case, by using the same principle of momentum, the mass of the bicycle and its user is slightly higher than the mass of the pedestrian. But the real problem is in the velocity. A bicycle is moving at a high speed, maybe 20, 25, sometimes up to 32 kilometers per hour, as compared to a pedestrian who is only moving at 40 kilometers per hour speed. So there is large difference in speed, which in this case may result in injuries to the pedestrian. Or the third type of bicycle collisions is single vehicle collision. Like what you see in this image here, a cyclist is using a cycling facility and the cycling facility is not up to the standard in terms of the maintenance. There's a pothole or a deep crack or any type of surface discontinuity in the cycling facility. And in this case, the cyclist may fall off from the bicycle and get hurt. I have already investigated many and many collisions like this one. A cyclist is using a cycling facility and the cycling facility is not well maintained and the cyclist gets ejected from the bicycle and gets hurt. So this is the third type of bicycle collision. We also understand that safety is always shared responsibility. And this is also the same principle in terms of cycling safety or cyclist safety, sorry. So the safety of cyclists depends on many stakeholders. First of all, the law. There should be laws that protect cyclists. For example, vehicles are not allowed to drive on over cycling facilities, or vehicles must give right of way to cyclists and other laws. So, in terms of lawmaking and also law enforcement, this is one factor that affects cyclist safety. The second factor is the road authority that must plan, design, operate, and maintain safe cycling facilities. And we'll talk about this in more detail in the next slides. The third factor is other road users who must respect the rights of cyclists and must give them some space. And of course, the fourth and most important factor is the cyclists themselves or themselves. Okay. Uh, Unfortunately, sometimes cyclists don't give much regard to their own safety. Sometimes they run red lights. Sometimes they ride on over sidewalks. Sometimes they don't give right of way, or many other problems that can result in serious injuries. So, from among all these factors, I'm not specialized in law or law enforcement, so I will touch on this, but it is not my specialty, of course. I'm not specialized, and of course, law also affects other road users and cyclists themselves. But the remainder of this presentation will focus more on road authority, but I will still touch on other factors as well. And I will also explain how those other factors can integrate with the road authority. So in terms of the planning and designing of cycling facilities, of course, the first set of guidelines is those published by the Transportation Association of Canada, TAC, and the latest edition we have is the one that was published in June 2017, Geometric Design Guide for Canadian Roads. There's a complete chapter, which I believe it is chapter 5, and chapter 5 is for bicycle integrated design. It is about the planning and design of cycling facilities. And these are some of the topics included in this chapter. Of course, design vehicle, speed, momentum. We already explained momentum before. And what are the different types of cycling facilities? We'll talk about different types of cycling facilities in a few minutes. We have another set of guidelines, which is the Bikeways Design Manual. And of course, this is published by the Ministry of Transportation Ontario, MTO, but they can be used as a benchmark in any other province. And they build on the information that we can see here in the TAC guidelines, but it has a little more details. And these are some of the topics covered in the manual. Again, types of cycling facilities, the design standards for each type of cycling facilities. Then we also have book number 18 from the Ontario Traffic Manual. We have two editions. The earlier edition was published December 2013. The later edition was published in June 2021. And this is very valuable book that gives guidelines on the planning, design, and also on the signage and lane marking for cycling facilities. So It is more comprehensive than the other sets. And again, even though it is published in Ontario, but it can be used as a benchmark or a guideline for any other province in Canada. Some municipalities have their own guidelines as well. For example, here, the City of Toronto has a set of guidelines for the design of multi-use trails. And of course, those multi-use trails are typically shared by pedestrians and cyclists at the same time, okay? So to start with, I have already investigated over, I would say, at least 150 or 160 bicycle collisions. Some of them were very severe, maybe 2 or 3 of them were fatal, unfortunately, and some others were less severe. And I was able to identify some trends in terms of the planning and design and maintenance of cycling facilities. So to start with, let's talk about the planning. Planning, meaning we, like the road authority decides to install a cycling facility, and once the road authority decides to install a cycling facility, which type of cycling facility should be installed. Unfortunately, sometimes the selection is not the proper selection. So to understand all types of cycling facilities, we have on-road cycling facilities, which include paved shoulder route, like what you see here. Like this is more typical in rural areas where the shoulder is paved and it is provided for cyclists to be used. Or a bicycle lane, like this bicycle lane that you can see here. This bicycle lane can have a buffer zone, or sometimes it does not have a buffer zone, depending on the space availability, of course. Raised track, this is more common in York region, where cyclists can use a raised track that is separated from the traffic lane and also separated from the sidewalk. Or a shared route, which is the lowest class of a cycling facility, typically a traffic lane where cyclists are allowed to share with other motor vehicles. The selection of the cycling facility depends on, of course, the number one factor that I didn't even mention here is the availability of space. If we have more space, we can provide dedicated cycling facility. If we don't have more space, then unfortunately, we may end up by only providing a shared route like this one. But of course, there are many other factors, including the cyclist traffic volume. Like if we have more cyclists, then they need more dedicated facilities. Vehicular traffic volume, more vehicles means more risk to cyclists and more hazard to cyclists, then a dedicated cycling facility could be warranted. Vehicular speed, the higher vehicular speed means more hazard to cyclists, meaning that a dedicated cycling facility could be warranted. Percentage of heavy vehicles, of course, because of the very large mass of heavy vehicles, then unfortunately, if a cyclist gets struck by a heavy vehicle, a bus or a truck or something, unfortunately, it is almost certain that it could be a fatal collision. So in a case like this, a dedicated cycling facility could be more warranted if we have more heavy vehicles in traffic. So again, it is a little complicated process to select which type of cycling facility. And I understand that this box here, they have a decision tree that you can follow to decide on the type of cycling facility that you can use. And you can see it here in this manual, and it is also in the traffic, in the the Ontario Traffic Manual. And there's another also decision tree that is provided in the TAC guidelines. Another common issue is if the road authority decides to install a dedicated cycling facility while there's a large right turn volume. In a case like this, of course, theoretically speaking, we can say, okay, the driver should always check for the blind spot when making a right turn, which is true, of course. But unfortunately, drivers sometimes forget, or sometimes they don't care, or sometimes they check, but they are physically unable to see an oncoming bicycle. And in this case, there could be a collision between a right-turning vehicle and a bicycle on the dedicated cycling facility. I have already seen at least 18 or 20 collisions like this one. And because of this, the rule of thumb is that a dedicated cycling facility is not recommended if the road has short blocks. If we have many cross intersections along the road and many drivers are making right turns at those intersections, in a case like this, a dedicated cycling facility is not recommended, or if you provide it, then you need a signal for the cycling facility, like this signal here. There could be a little bit of a solution where the right turn starts before the intersection so that drivers can merge before reaching the intersection. This may reduce the risk a little bit, but of course it will not eliminate the risk. And as I said, the rule of thumb here is usually to avoid cycling facilities on roads that have short blocks and several intersecting streets with high right turn volume. Another problem here is on-street parking. Unfortunately, many cyclists get hurt because of what we call dooring. This is when a driver parks the vehicle, opens the door to exit the vehicle, and a bicycle is moving, and the cyclist does not expect the door to open suddenly and ends up by colliding with the open door and gets hurt. This is called dooring. And because of this, it is not recommended to use this configuration for on-street parking. Instead, many municipalities now use this like a buffer zone between the on-street parking and the cycling facility, a buffer zone of at least 1 meter to allow the door to open without colliding or without obstructing the path of cyclists. Or a better solution is to move the cycling facility to the other side, like what you see in this photo here, so that when drivers open the driver's side door, it does not obstruct the cycling facility. Now, let's move to other common issues related to the design of cycling facilities. One of them is the improper discontinuation of cycling facility. Sometimes it is necessary to terminate a cycling facility. The question here is where to terminate it. According to the latest edition of the Ontario Traffic Manual book number 18, cycling facilities should not terminate at intersection. Instead, they must be terminated at mid-block. And the reason for this is very obvious, because at an intersection, there are several conflict points, and drivers usually have divided attention because they have to look at all those conflict points. So a driver approaching an intersection would be looking for vehicles coming from three other directions, vehicles making left turn from other directions, vehicles making right turn, pedestrian on the crosswalk. So the driver may not notice a cyclist who is merging with the traffic lane. And because of this, it is now recommended to terminate cycling facilities in mid-block at least 150 or 200 meters upstream of the nearest intersection. And in this case, this is the typical treatment to terminate a cycling facility. Of course, first you have to post this sign that informs cyclists that the cycling facility is now ending. And then you have to provide a 15 to 30 meter taper to allow cyclists to merge safely with other vehicles. And then, depending on the width of the traffic lane, you will need to post another sign, either this sign, single file, or this sign, share the road. What is the difference? The difference is that if the traffic lane is at least 4.5 meters in width, then cyclists and motor vehicles can share the road. And this is because, according to the law, drivers must provide minimum 1 meter separation between their vehicle, their motor vehicle, and the bicycle. So if the vehicle occupies approximately 2.75 meter and you need to give at least 1 meter separation, this is 3.75, and you give another 75 centimeter for the bicycle itself, this is at least 4.5 meters. So if the traffic lane width is at least 4.5 meters, you can post this sign. Otherwise, if the width of the traffic lane is less than 4.5 meters, you post that sign that says that motor vehicles and cyclists should move in a single file. However, in some situations, if it is necessary to end the bicycle facility or the cycling facility at an intersection, then this is the configuration to use it, which is not recommended. But only if it is necessary, then you must provide a minimum 30 meters for cyclists to merge. And of course, you must alert cyclists that the cycling facility is now ended. Another issue that unfortunately is common in many municipalities around Canada is the lack of bicycle crossing at intersections. This photograph I have taken myself while investigating a bicycle collision. Unfortunately, as you can see, this is a cycling facility. And where does it go? Nowhere. Like now, if a cyclist wants to cross the road, that cyclist will have to select between two choices. Both of them are not good. Either to cross mid-block, like this red arrow here, which is unsafe, of course, or to cross using the pedestrian crossing, which also unsafe and prohibited by the law. So in a situation like this, the road authority did not do a good job in providing a dedicated crossing for cycling facility. And this is the proper treatment. Like if this is the cycling facility, then there should be a continuation and a dedicated crossing for the cycling facility that is separated from the pedestrian crossing. Another problem, which is the improper use of utility covers or like catch basin covers. If you use this type of cover, then the wheel of the bicycle may get caught inside the cover. And this is why it is always recommended to use openings that are perpendicular to the travel path of bicycles, or more common now is to use this what's called herringbone openings. The herringbone opening looks like a fish bone, which is more practical and safer for cyclists, like what you see in this photo here. Another problem is improper curb cut. I have also taken this photograph myself when I was investigating a bicycle collision. And as you can see here, there is a high lip between the driveway and the traffic lane. So if a cyclist wants to enter this driveway, and by the way, this was a school, okay? So many kids were cycling to the school, and this is how the curb cut looked like. So cycling turning into the driveway, of course, may hit this lip and may be ejected from the bicycle and gets hurt. And of course, this is just you know zoomed uh, photo to show the lip. The improper width of cycling facility, as you can see here, this was supposed to be a dedicated bicycle lane, and it was too narrow. According to the design standards, the minimum width of a bicycle lane should be at least 1.5 meters. More preferred to be 1.8 meter, but here it is less than this value. Even the symbol, like there was no space for the symbol to be printed on the bicycle facilities. So of course, this is not the proper width of the cycling facility. And here, this is a multi-use terrain inside a park where pedestrians and cyclists share the same trail together. In this case, the minimum width of the trail should be at least 3 meters to allow cyclists and pedestrians to safely share the trail. If the width is less than 3 meters, then someone can get hurt. Another problem is the side distance. We understand that side distance is more common in collisions related to vehicles, like motor vehicles, but sometimes it is also relevant to collisions related to bicycles. For example, this is a multi-use trail that is intersecting with another multi-use trail. You see where this lady and this gentleman are going. They are actually going into another multi-use trail. So this is a trail intersecting with another trail. If someone is riding a bicycle along this trail, someone else is riding another bicycle along the other trail, they may collide with each other. Again, you may say, okay, if a cyclist reaches a situation like this, then that cyclist must stop and look before proceeding, which is true, of course. But unfortunately, some people don't do this. And our job here in terms of safe system design is to allow for human errors. And it does not mean, of course, that we want people to drive recklessly or ride their bicycle recklessly, but we must allow for like normal human errors. So in this case, this tree was supposed to be cut down or at least trimmed to allow for better sight line between the intersecting trails. Improper design of drainage system. If the drainage system is not properly designed, we may end up with ice or accumulation of snow over the pavement. And this is too dangerous, of course. Or the cycling facility may deteriorate more quickly because of the improper design of the drainage system, so that the water will now penetrate through the pavement and starts to deteriorate the cycling facility. Another problem, of course, is surface discontinuity, and this is more related to the maintenance of the cycling facility. As you can see in these photographs here, of course, it is not safe to ride a bicycle over those cracks and potholes and surface discontinuity. And according to the design standards, cycling facilities should be free of bumps, potholes, and other surface irregularities. And any surface discontinuity should not exceed 20 millimeter, 2 centimeter, because bicycles, they don't have a suspension system, so they cannot tolerate large surface discontinuity like other motor vehicles. Accumulation of snow and ice. Sometimes, due to the lack of space, of physical space, then road authorities may utilize bicycle lanes for the storage of snow. In this case, the road authority must inform the cyclist that the bicycle lane is closed. So, of course, this was supposed to be a bicycle lane. You can see this sign here that this is a dedicated bicycle lane, but it was not maintained during the winter, so it is not safe to ride over this bicycle lane. In this case, the road authority must put a sign to inform cyclists that the bicycle lane is not maintained during the winter or it is completely closed. In terms of temporary work zones, construction zones, unfortunately, this is usually one of the one area where cyclists get more hurt. Why? Because of several things. Excavation, moving equipment, uneven service conditions, obstructions because of signs or birds or any other obstruction, and confusion. Like, just imagine you're riding a bicycle in a situation like this. There is a lot of confusion. You don't know where to go, whether you go this way or you go the other way. It is very confusing. So, of course, in a temporary work zone, cyclists must be protected from all these conditions here, and they must be guided through the work zone safely. And an adequate lane width must be provided through the work zone. And as I said before, if the available lane width is less than 4.5 meters, then you must put a sign that cyclists and motor vehicles should form a single file. If you can provide a lane width that is at least 4.5 meters, then you put another sign that informs cyclists that they can ride side by side with motor vehicles. Now we spoke about collisions between cyclists and pedestrians. So, according to the law, cyclists should not use sidewalks or pedestrian crossing. Why? Because of the same rule of momentum that we spoke before. Momentum equals mass times velocity. So, the speed of a bicycle could be as high as 32 kilometers per hour. When compared to the typical speed of a pedestrian of 40 kilometers per hour, then an impact from the bicycle to the pedestrian would now be multiplied by 8. 4 times 8, this is 32. Meaning that any impact from the bicycle to the pedestrian will now multiplied by 8. So a pedestrian could be seriously injured if struck by a bicycle. And this is why these two photographs are violating the law. Cyclists should not use the sidewalk like what you see in this photograph. And also a cyclist should not use a pedestrian crossing like what you see in the other photograph here. Even worse, another problem here when a cyclist is using a sidewalk is because if a driver is merging from a driveway or an intersecting street, then that driver would look to the right and to the left to check the sidewalk, making sure that no pedestrians are approaching. Then the the diver starts to move while this bicycle is moving at a very high speed, as high as 32 kilometers per hour. The diver is not expecting a bicycle to be moving at such a high speed on a sidewalk. So ends up that the diver may strike the cyclist because the diver did not even expect a cyclist on the sidewalk. I have already investigated maybe 5 or 6 similar collisions to this one. So if you don't believe that a pedestrian struck by a cyclist may be seriously injured, this is a story from Calgary where unfortunately a lady died after being struck by a 12-year-old cyclist. And that was in 2025, August 2025. This is another story from Toronto that was back in 2009. Another lady died after being struck by a cyclist in Scarborough, Toronto. So there are few things to remember. Cyclists above a certain age, usually 10 to 14 years, are typically not allowed on sidewalks. Persons below the age of 16 are not usually allowed to ride an e-bike because they don't have enough expertise. Cyclists are required to wear a helmet. Bicycles are required to be equipped with reflectors and lights. Speed of an e-bike should not usually exceed 32 kilometers per hour. The power of an e-bike motor should not exceed 500 watts. It is illegal to modify an e-bike to increase its speed or power output. Now, I hope this part of the presentation will be interesting to you, given that we have less than 10 minutes. So I will, for each photograph I'm show to you, I will, pause for a few seconds for you to reflect on the photograph and try to identify what is wrong, and then I will give you my feedback. In this photograph, this is a dedicated cycling facility, and what you can see here, of course, lack of crossing. So the cycling facility does not have crossing to cross this road. This is another photograph, a cycling facility, and again, you can easily see there is lack of crossing also. And by the way, this is a cycling track. It is elevated cycling facility that is elevated over the traffic lane, and it does not have crossing here. But even worse, if you look more closely, this is how it ends. What happened here is that the municipality transformed the cycling facility into a sidewalk, and for some reason, they kept the cycling facility on this side of the road, and they built the sidewalk on the other side of the road without informing cyclists that the cycling facility is now terminated. So someone is riding a bicycle along this cycling facility and suddenly finds that there is now a curb and the cycling facility is no more a cycling facility, it is now a sidewalk, even so the municipality did not even remove this sign that says that this is a dedicated cycling facility. And by the way, this is an actual photograph that I took from an actual collision site. In this case, this is a dedicated cycling facility with a buffer zone to separate the facility from adjacent traffic lane, which is beautiful. So what is the problem here? The problem is this is how the surface of the cycling facility looks like. Of course, a lot of cracks, a large bump. It is not in the best condition. Why? Because there is no gutter, and gutter is important to take the storm water into the catch basin that you see here. This is another dedicated cycling facility, and this is how it looks like. You have a large pothole, you have a surface discontinuity, you have another pothole. Of course, it is not the best maintenance condition that municipality can provide to cyclists. And here, on the other hand, unfortunately, this cyclist not wearing a helmet, cutting through traffic lanes recklessly. And what did he do after this? He rolled over the sidewalk doing wheelie on the sidewalk. Of course, this is very sad. He does not have any regard to his own safety or to the safety of other road users. What you can see in this photo here, this is now becoming a more common problem, which is food delivery. Like in many municipalities, food delivery is now carried out by e-bikes and bicycles. And unfortunately, many of those bicycles occupy the sidewalk, which was supposed to be used by pedestrians. So in this photograph, for example, you see there's already like the store already occupied part of the sidewalk by putting some of the merchandise, and the cyclist is using another part of the sidewalk, and the available part for pedestrian is now becoming much less. Of course, this is becoming more problematic. So final thoughts, bicycle collisions are typically the result of a complex interaction of human, environmental, and roadway factors rather than a single cause. The safety of cyclists is strongly influenced by the planning, design, and maintenance of cycling infrastructure. Cycling facilities require a higher standard of maintenance than general traffic lanes due to the increased sensitivity to surface defects. Temporary work zones present elevated risk to cyclists, particularly, especially where guidance, continuity, or protection is insufficient. While compliance with applicable law is important, it does not eliminate risks for cyclists or other road users. System design must account for human errors to effectively protect cyclists and other road users. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend this webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it, and please don't forget to complete the post-webinar survey using this link. I will leave the link for you to scan. Please scan this QR code and go to the link and fill out the survey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. DeBoer. That was really insightful and engaging session. What really stood out is how cyclist safety isn't just about one factor. It's about interaction between design, human behavior, and the broader system. Your examples really made that clear and very practical. We have only a couple minutes for questions. We promise we will send the answers out. We'll provide these questions that you gave us to Dr. DeBoer and get the answers out to everyone. And I want to remind you again just to do the survey. I'll start with the first questions, but because they were the first, how do the injury trends look per capita? Are they trending downward or are they stable?
This is a very good question. As road safety professionals, we don't want to get misled by injury per capita because not all people are using bicycles. And unfortunately, we don't have exact number of cyclists, but we can compare it to bicycle infrastructure. So as I showed before during the presentation, for example, in the city of Toronto, the cycling infrastructure has recently increased significantly, and even so, the injuries were going down, which means this is a good trend because large infrastructure means more cyclists, and then on the other hand, the number of injuries is going down. Okay, but in terms of per capita, it is not because not everyone is using cycles. For example, you cannot compare an congested urban area where you expect to see a lot of cyclists to a rural area where no one is cycling.
Great. I'll ask one more question and then we'll probably have to wrap up. If you're able to stay on for the last question, feel free. Alexandra asked how you collect injury data for cyclists when often, for example, the Quebec police only file reports when there's a motor vehicle involved.
Again, not all bicycle collisions are reported to the police, and like bicycle collisions are usually underreported, like unless there's an injury, like a significant injury or a serious injury. Otherwise, it is not usually reported, and I agree that this will affect the accuracy of the data. I agree that even in Ontario also, usually bicycle collisions are only reported if there's a serious injury or if there's a collision with a motor vehicle. So I agree with this that due to the lack of or due to the underreporting problem, the data may not be very accurate. I agree on this.
Great. And do you know any statistics about how the number of cycle crashes are changing per hour of travel or by kilometers?
I don't have this data, which is very interesting question. I like this
Mm-hmm.
question. It is
Mm-hmm.
like this gives me like an idea to start looking for this data. Thank you very much for giving me this idea. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions. Has the introduction of cross-riding pavement markings on crosswalks increased the number of vehicle, cyclists, and cyclist pedestrian collisions?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Has the introduction of cross-riding pavement markings on crosswalks increased the number of vehicle, cyclist, and cyclist pedestrian collisions?
What is the cross riding? I don't fully understand this.
Cross-riding pavement markings on crosswalks.
I'm not familiar with this.
Mm,
Like honestly, I'm not familiar with it. I understand that sometimes the crosswalk itself is marked in two portions, one portion for pedestrians, another portion for cyclists, which is very good. It is not bad, you know. Even so, cyclists and pedestrians are crossing side by side, but each one will be crossing on it over the dedicated portion of the crosswalk, which is acceptable. But for the cross marking, I honestly, I'm not familiar with it. I don't know what exactly does it mean, if it means what I'm talking about or it means something different. I'm not sure, honestly.
okay. So when talking about separated cycling facilities not being desirable on short blocks, is there any research we can use to assist in deciding what is desirable? Block length would be one consideration, but also volume of cyclists, turning vehicles, speeds, etc., would also need to be considered.
Of course. Like before deciding on which type of cycling facility to be built, we need to have complete turning volumes for the traffic, like traffic turning volumes. We must have it. And then we need to look at the right turn volumes. If we see consistent right turn volume at every intersection in short blocks, then we may reconsider the decision to install a cycling facility. And by the way, like from my own experience, this happened in on one street in Toronto. At that time, that was a long time ago, I was working for a consulting company, and the city of Toronto was asking for consulting services to install a bicycle lane on a certain street. And when I looked at the map and I obtained the traffic volume and I found a large right turn volume, I spoke with my manager at that time, told him this is not a good decision because of the large right turn volume. So my manager spoke with the city, but at the end of the day, the city decided to use a different consultant and they installed the cycling facility, which lasted for like 3 or 4 years. After this, it was removed again. So we need to have the right turn volume, and if the right turn volume is large at short distances, then this is not a good option.
Great. Two more quick ones. Shouldn't the focus be more on impulse rather than momentum while fast speeds have higher energy and forces, it's ultimately the time factor that determines the impact and severity.
Of course, they are all
Mhm.
correlated together. Of course, like we
And
usually in any collision, either bicycle collision, vehicle collision, any type of collision, we look at what's called delta V, which looks at both the impulse and the momentum, of course.
perfect. Um, Finally, Richard comments, it'd be interesting to see if there will be any trends associated with the elimination of ASE in Ontario.
Oh, I already wrote.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
that's it. Any other questions, we will definitely try to answer offline. Again, thank you so much. This is really interesting. My first webinar, and I look forward to seeing you all again at other webinars. And thank
thank
you
you very
again.
much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.